Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchek, dietitian, fitness coach, and a fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchek Performance Nutrition, I've spent the last 10 years helping runners learn to fuel their bodies, level up their running performance, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, then let's get started on today's episode. All right. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Natchek, and I am really excited to bring you today's episode, which has some roots in a personal thing that I just went through that I wanted to bring to you. And that is talking about buying a treadmill. And so, as some of you might know, if you follow me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian, I recently bought a new to me secondhand treadmill and went through, some different things with getting it home. Whatever, it was a little bit of a process. And I had gotten some questions about what I bought and do you like it and stuff like that. And I thought, what a great idea for an episode to talk about, how to pick a treadmill, how to pick out the right one for you. Because I ended up, not just with this treadmill that I purchased, but with the previous treadmill that I had and stuff like that, done a lot of research looking into treadmills and what specs are important, what considerations you need to have, how much you should spend, like what are good prices, all that kind of stuff. And so I thought it would make a great idea for an episode. I asked on my Instagram, put a poll up on my stories to see what you guys thought. And sure enough, the vast majority of you were interested in some tips and advice if you are considering investing in a treadmill for yourself. So that is what we are here to talk about today. So the treadmill that I had previously, liked it. I had got, it got a lot of use. We had got it from some friends who were moving. So we had got this machine, hadn't necessarily sort of picked it out or anything like that, but just the opportunity came and it sat in our basement for a really long time. I was doing most of my training at the gym, like going out of the house to run, running outside on the indoor track, that sort of thing. So the treadmill at home didn't really get used very much actually until 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. And then all of a sudden, this treadmill sort of became like my mainstay, my day to day. And I actually ended up getting a lot of use out of it. So as it turns out, this machine isn't necessarily built for the types of workouts that I was doing on it. And so I do think that I probably, wore it out a little bit sooner than maybe it would have been if somebody was just doing what that treadmill was made for on it. But anyway, it definitely got me thinking. And when I used to own a in-person personal training studio, I had a treadmill there. And of course, spent a lot of time trying to figure out what sort of machine I was looking for. So that kind of brings me to today's episode to talk to you about what you might be looking for. What are some important considerations, some things to think about if you are going to be buying a treadmill of your own. So I don't know if I normally I don't know if my episodes normally need this, but I feel like this is an episode where you might want to just hit pause for a second and go get a notepad and a pen and maybe write some things down. I don't know. I feel like this is something that or maybe you're gonna have to come back and listen to this episode multiple times. I have no idea. But we're gonna be going through some numbers, some specs, some things. Quite a bit of info to share here. So you may want to just go grab something to make some notes, write some stuff down. If you are, I guess, more tech savvy than I am, you can make some notes on your phone. But anyway, just so you know, before we start getting into it. So my first tip, and this is kind of tip number one, kind of tip number two. My first tip, the first thing I want you to think about is to think about your budget. And the reason that this might be your first priority, or maybe it ends up being your second priority, is because once you start thinking about what you need the treadmill for and the specs that go along with it, the amount of money that you need to spend you may decide that you need to invest a little bit more to get the machine you want versus sticking within a really strict budget. And then ultimately you end up having to replace that treadmill or buy parts or something like that much sooner. I will, though, make a plug for the secondhand treadmill market. If you know what you're looking for and you can look at the specs and stuff like that, I think there is tremendous, tremendous opportunity for getting a fantastic deal secondhand. Anyway, first thing to figure out is your budget. Depending on how flexible you are with some of, I'll say, the bells and whistles and some of those added features, you might want to spend a little bit more after looking at your wish list, or you might want to just wait until the right machine comes on sale, or maybe something pre-owned. It might be worth it to you to just wait to stick within a specific budget. So the next really important consideration, and again, this might be number one for you to kind of think about versus number two, would be, what are you going to be doing on this treadmill? How will you be using this treadmill? Is it going to be, occasional runs, mostly easy miles? Maybe you're someone who does a lot of walking and you just want something that you can walk, run a little bit. It's not going to honestly get a ton of use. And the other big thing is, are you maybe a rather petite person that from a weight perspective isn't going to be, adding a lot of stress to the motor and stuff like that if you're doing just like easy runs and you're a smaller individual? Or number two, are you going to be doing most of your runs on this treadmill? Maybe if you're someone like me, you live in a place where you've got winter, maybe you're going to be doing a lot more running on it in the winter time, maybe a little bit less in the summer, but it's going to have consistent use and like, a few workouts a week at least. Or are you someone who's going to be doing pretty much all of your runs, including all of your speed work on the treadmill? Personally, I'm a B, again, especially in the wintertime. I have so much respect for those of you who refuse to run on a treadmill and just run outside all year round, no matter the weather. But there is no way that I'm getting my butt out the door when it's -40. Have I done it? Yes. Do I like it? No. So for me to just, be able to go downstairs, use my treadmill, especially when the little ones are sleeping, it just makes it so much easier for me to be consistent with my running. And, if you're a parent who has to get your workouts done when the kids are in bed or during nap time and you just, can't leave the house, all of your runs are going to be done on this treadmill, then just know that it's going to be getting a lot more miles and a lot more hours put on it. And so getting a quality machine that can stand up to that is going to be really important. This is one of the sort of biggest considerations and why I'm kind of getting you to think about what you're going to be doing on this treadmill and how much use it's going to get, because a heavier duty, yes, more expensive, but like a heavier duty, more robust treadmill is going to give you more mileage, more hours, and just more years of use versus buying something a little bit more lightweight, a little bit more, cost effective. You might burn that thing out in just a couple of years and then you're going to be replacing it. And, you could have just spent a little bit more and maybe gotten double the lifetime out of it. So that's kind of the first two things is, how much are we looking to spend here? New versus pre-owned, that kind of thing. And then what are you going to be doing on it? How much use is this treadmill going to get? And that's going to kind of set you up for the next part of our conversation here. And the next part of our conversation is looking at the specific specs on any potential models that you're looking at. And the reason that this is so important is to actually like dig into the specs of the treadmill and not just go by like the model number or even the brand or anything like that, is because what I have found in my research is that every single store seems to carry different models of the different brands of treadmill. Like if you're shopping at Costco, or if you're looking on the website for the manufacturer, like the Nordic Tracker or whatever website, or you go and look at what Costco has, or maybe Canadian Tire, or the fitness store that maybe sells like the higher end stuff, like whatever it is, where you shop, they all have different models. And so it's impossible to like really compare prices. And I find it really hard to compare cost and sort of know, like, are you getting good value, especially when you're looking at like, places that often have very deep discounts and a lot of sales. It's like, is it discounted but it's actually a cheaper model than maybe what you would get paying regular price, but a much better quality machine. So really digging into the specs and picking out the specs you want, then looking at what that price gets you and being able to compare that way is much easier than trying to find the same treadmill and price shop the same treadmill, because it's very hard to find. I hope that made sense. So the first thing, and I will say that this is probably the most important consideration if we're looking at like the longevity of the treadmill and its ability to keep up with the demands of what you're doing on it, is going to be the horsepower. So it's CHP, that stands for continuous horsepower, is what we see on treadmill lingo. If you are looking at a machine that's like a 2 to 2.5 CHP, unfortunately, that is going to be appropriate for like walking, light jogging, easy, sort of minimal use. Like, this is not your kind of heavy duty, certainly not like a commercial type of treadmill that you're going to be able to run on every single day and get a really long lifespan out of it. The previous treadmill that I had, I can't remember exactly what the horsepower was, but it was definitely on the lower end. Like, it was a smaller, more lightweight machine. And, it lasted me only a few years of like continuous, always running on it before it started to break down and not work as well anymore. So, just something to keep in mind. If you're going to be running on your treadmill, then you definitely want at least 3 horsepower at a minimum. Of course, higher, that more powerful motor is just going to have to work less hard to keep up with what you're doing on it. Therefore, you're going to get more longevity out of it. I've also seen on some of the websites and reviews that I was looking at, if you are a heavier runner as well, then looking into a higher horsepower model is also probably going to be beneficial, because again, that means that the motor isn't going to have to work as hard to keep up. And so you'll get a much longer lifespan out of that treadmill as well. Unfortunately, that means that you probably will have to spend a little bit more money. And that's sort of the give and take of maybe getting a few extra years of life and of use out of the machine. The other thing, kind of on that note, when we're talking about the power and the size of the motor, is going to be the weight capacity on that machine. And so all the machines are going to have like a listed weight capacity. You want to look for something that's at least 50 pounds more than what you weigh. If you're looking at something that is kind of right on, like the machine you're looking at is sort of right around what your weight happens to be, then again, with frequent use, especially running on it, you may wear out that machine prematurely, kind of before that lifespan is really up. So you want to be looking at like the size of the motor, what the weight capacity is, and then just like the general size of the machine. So like, does it fold? Do you need it to fold, right? You may not need that to be a feature. Personally, for me, my treadmill is set up all the time in my basement in the gym area, so it doesn't need to fold. That's not a feature that I care about at all. But other people want something a little bit more compact and lightweight that they can fold and bring out and put away as they need to, and that sort of thing. And if that's important to you, then that's definitely worth making sure that that's one of the features that you're going to get. But if it isn't, then a machine that is more, I'll say, lightweight and meant for foldability and movability maybe isn't something that you really need to be considering. The other thing is, especially if you're buying the treadmill secondhand, will this treadmill fit in your house through your doorways? And if not, highly recommend measuring before you get it home. And if the answer is no, then knowing what you're going to do to disassemble and reassemble in your workout space. So with this treadmill that I recently purchased, this pre-owned treadmill that I got, of course, it was set up and put together. So we loaded it up into the back of my husband's truck, and it was very heavy. I felt very confident that I was getting a good treadmill, like just for how hard it was to get in the back of that truck. Got it home, got it unloaded. Of course, this is no small feat for just my husband and I to, get it around the back of the house, to get it to the back door where it's going to go straight down the stairs. Well, then we realize that this treadmill is a full 6 inches too wide for the doorway. So, okay, well, we're going to have to start taking it apart, which honestly is probably fine because this thing weighs, 10 million pounds. I don't know how much it weighs, but it felt like 10 million pounds to like maneuver it and like twist it and turn it and pivot it, get it around to get it in the house. Honestly, it's probably easier if we just take it apart. Well, this darn treadmill ended up having to come apart into like 6 pieces. Like it had to be completely taken apart. It took us, I use the term us very loosely. It took my poor husband hours and hours to like get it all apart, get it downstairs, put it back together, make sure it's working, all that kind of stuff. So that would be something that I would highly recommend thinking about in advance so that you aren't kind of battling the clock or maybe bad weather or don't have anybody to help you if and when you get that treadmill home. So thinking about the size, the floor space, all those things, which brings us to our conversation about belt size. So you've got two different things, of course, the width of the belt and then the length of the belt. So if you think about when you go to a gym or a fitness center and you get on those like commercial size treadmills, right? Like they're big, they're wide. Like you get on, you've got tons of space to run, lots of space front and back. Whereas if you step on a lot of like home treadmills, like ones that you find, ones that you have for home use, they're just smaller, right? And part of that, of course, is the cost. Part of that is that they're more lightweight and movable, right? Those big heavy duty commercial machines are meant for hours and hours and hours of heavy use every single day by people of all sizes, all speeds. And so if you're going to be running on your treadmill, then ideally you would choose a belt size that's at least 22 inches wide. And so that's just going to give you a little bit more, quite literally wiggle room to be able to take a step here, there, kind of back and forth, right? As you're running, you're not running in like a perfect line. And if you've ever accidentally sort of stepped on the side of the treadmill as you're running, like, that's very dangerous. You don't want that to happen. So 22 inches wide, that's about just under 56 centimeters wide is what you're looking for. And then in terms of length, 55 inches long is great for running, which is going to be about 140 centimeters long. So if you're running, you're going to want a length of that treadmill belt that's at least 55 inches. If you're over 6 feet tall, then ideally something actually 60 inches long is going to be even better, just so your feet aren't like either slipping off the back or so you're not like stepping and like hitting the front part where the belt goes under like the plastic cap that's there in the front. So that's 60 inches is 152.4 centimeters. So that's what you're looking for there. In terms of belt quality, of course, there's belt size, and then you can also get belts that are thicker. So, like more, I'll say higher end, more expensive treadmill models have thicker, like multi ply belts. These ones don't heat up as much, and so you get just a longer life out of them. And then you can also get self lubricating belts as well. So, ones that don't need as much maintenance from you. Less maintenance means probably a longer life. You might be the kind of person who's very diligent about doing regular treadmill maintenance and stuff like that. But if you are like the rest of us and you didn't really know that any of this stuff was necessary, then maybe you've gone many, many years without doing any work to your treadmill. But just know that it's worth looking into if you're someone who like that you're probably not going to do that regular maintenance. If you want to get the most longevity out of your treadmill, might be worth the extra few dollars to get a machine that self lubricates. So we talked about power, the horsepower, the weight capacity, the size of the treadmill, what you want to look for size-wise for what you're doing. Then the next one is going to be some of like the features of the machine. So you'll see that the treadmills will advertise like what their max speed is. And this may be important for you or it may not be, depending on how fast of a runner you are, how much speed work you're going to be doing, again, overall volume of running. So for example, a lot of treadmills will have a 12 mile per hour max speed. That's about a 5-minute mile. And so for me personally, I certainly don't need a treadmill that goes faster than 12 miles per hour. I tried one time to see how long could I run at 12 miles per hour for. It's not very long. It's not long enough that I need a treadmill that goes that fast. You can, though, with, again, more kind of higher end treadmills, and you may need this depending on the type of runner you are. Treadmills that go up to 15 miles per hour. It's about a 4-minute mile. You probably don't need anything faster than that. I don't know what you're doing on that treadmill if you need something faster than that. But yeah, so they are going to just, be some different things to think about in regard to what max speed you're looking for. Like, do you need the highest end treadmill that like has the heavy duty motor and can go up to 50 miles an hour, or can you probably get away with something that caps out at 12? Same goes for incline and decline. You're going to see some treadmills that go to, I believe, a 10%, 12% incline, and other ones that do go to a 15. Again, this may be something that is really important for you. Maybe you do a lot of incline or even decline work, or maybe you don't. And if you can get to like 1, maybe 4, 5%, et cetera, you'll be perfectly happy. If the treadmill that you are using has a decline and you're training for a race that does have, some hills and some decline, stuff like that, and you're not doing as much outside training, or you live somewhere that's unbelievably flat, then this might be something that you want to include. Decline training can be very beneficial for activating different muscles. And especially if you have a race and you want to get into that race specific decline training, then that might be worth considering, and it might be a good thing to have. In regard to features, some of the treadmills also have a reversible belt. So this is great because that means that you're going to get essentially twice as much use out of being able to just turn it around and have, having that less wear and tear on the belt, and being able to get that extra lifespan out of it. There's also the size of the rollers. So the rollers that the belt actually like rolls on. Bigger rollers are also going to give you less wear and tear. They don't heat up as much. And so they're going to give you less wear and tear on that belt too. So bigger rollers, at least 2.5 inches in diameter, are what you ideally want to look for in your machine. Now, in general, I'll say higher quality machines, like the more expensive, more heavy duty stuff like that, are going to have a lot of these features kind of across the board. So like a machine with more horsepower is also probably going to have a higher weight capacity. It's also going to have a bigger belt. It's also going to be larger, take up more floor space. It might also have the higher max speed. Again, that may or may not be important for you. It's probably going to also have like a bigger incline, decline, that sort of thing. So when you're thinking about this list, it's not so much that you are, needing to go through all of the specs for a machine and like tick off every single box. Chances are they're going to have a lot of these, like a lot of the more high quality machines are going to have a lot of these things already. But thinking about what are the most important features that I'm looking for, and making sure that the treadmill that you're considering at least has that. And again, for you, this might be horsepower, it might be weight capacity, it might be belt size, right? If you are a very tall runner, then maybe the bigger belt size is the most important thing. Maybe it's the speed, maybe it's having a machine that does decline, whatever it might be. Thinking about these different specs and what things you really want and what you're really looking for from this list. Then we kind of get to what I would consider to be, and maybe you don't, maybe these are must-haves for you, but what I would consider to be sort of your bells and whistles, right? We've kind of got through like the bones of the treadmill, the very kind of hardware things, and some of those features that I think really sort of make or break your experience with a machine, make or break the longevity that you're going to get out of a machine, and how good of an investment it really is for you. The bells and whistles part, this is some of the things that I think can really drive up the cost of a treadmill sometimes, and almost be a distraction from the bones of the machine and the things that are really more important. So I would caution you to not maybe get sucked in by some of the bells and whistles. And maybe forget about the actual, sort of specs that are a little bit more important. Some of the things that are going to make or break whether or not you get 10 years or maybe even longer out of this treadmill. And when I say bells and whistles, I mean this could be a touch screen versus, one that has like buttons, a fancy color. I don't know if there's LCD, maybe, I don't even know. A fan, maybe this is important for you, maybe it isn't. For me, it's like a nice to have, but I certainly wouldn't have not bought my treadmill if it didn't have a fan. It does, and I appreciate it. But I've also on my previous treadmill just like set up a box fan in front of the treadmill and just turned on a box fan, which you can buy for like probably $20. Whether it has Bluetooth connectivity, Wi-Fi connectivity, whether or not it connects to like different workout programming apps and all that kind of stuff. Of course, some machines are going to connect to your fitness apps, whereas other ones have like built-in apps and built-in workout programming. So again, personally for me, I really don't I don't use a lot of like guided workouts, workout programs and apps and stuff like that on the treadmill itself, right? I've got other apps and things like that that I use on my phone. But if you're someone who really loves your guided workouts, then definitely it's worth looking into a machine that's got those things as well, right? If you are going to be disappointed or maybe not use your treadmill very much because you don't have the guided workouts or the programming that you're looking for, well, then it's worth it to spend those extra few dollars to get those features that you really want. Are those features more important than the right bell size or right horsepower? No, they are not. So again, don't get distracted by the bells and whistles and by those some of those additional fancy features. But it's definitely worth it to kind of look at as an add-on or as an extra thing. Some of them also have, your sort of big enough monitor or screen built in that you could, connect. You could watch Netflix or something like that. Or maybe you already have a TV in your basement where you're going to be setting up and doing your workout. So you don't need an extra screen or something like that. So just some things to think about. If you don't need some of those extra features, like a touch screen, like the Bluetooth or Wi Fi connectivity, like all the workout programming and guided stuff, then you can potentially save a lot of money by buying either an older treadmill that stuff is, wasn't a thing back then anyway, and getting something really good secondhand, or getting still a good quality machine, but just saving money on some of those extra bells and whistles. When I was buying not the treadmill, but we purchased a couple of years ago a new exercise bike. And, looking at it, there was two different models that we were looking at. One of them had the screen, like one of them came with the TV with it, connected to the bike, and the other one didn't, but it had a spot, like a holder, where you could just like plop in your iPad or your, tablet, whatever. And, comparing the price, I don't remember what the difference in cost was, but it was significant. Like, and I was confused at first looking at these two bikes. I'm like, what's the difference between them? Like, why are they such a different price when all the specs look the same? Then I realized, oh, the difference is that you're getting a TV with one and not with the other one. So it was great because then, of course, I don't need the one with the TV. I've got an iPad, just plop it in the holder, and it does, of course, all the same things that you need it to do. So think about that as some of that stuff. It may be the difference between you making the investment that you're really happy with, or maybe you can save a few dollars by getting, rid of those things that you don't need. Which brings me to my last point and sort of topic for this episode is a conversation around like new versus used treadmills, right? With a new treadmill, what are the pros and cons? With a used treadmill, of course, what are the pros and cons? Obviously, with something new, you're always going to pay a premium price for the new machine. However, with that, it does mean that you're going to get a warranty. And sometimes that is going to be really, really important. If you, especially, more expensive, higher quality, higher end machines, some parts and not all of the treadmill, but some of those parts are actually going to have a lifetime warranty. So if certain pieces of that treadmill break down, you've got a lifetime warranty on that machine, which is great. Some things are only going to have maybe like a 2-year, 5-year, etc., which again is pretty good knowing you're going to get at least that many years of use out of it. But to you, it may be worth saving a few $1,000s potentially to get something pre-owned. And if you need to replace some parts, hire a handyman to come and, do some repairs, etc., that's worth it to you. One thing you might want to look into when kind of making this decision would be how expensive are the parts if you're going to end up ultimately doing some repairs yourself. And the reason that I say this is because with my previous treadmill, my husband and I had looked into what would it cost to replace some of the parts that obviously were worn out and not working properly anymore. And it was unfortunately going to be over $1,000 just for the parts to repair this previous treadmill, this older model. And so we thought, well, I mean, we can get another treadmill for a much better price than that. And sure enough, I did. So just something to maybe think about, but I wouldn't go into this relationship with your new treadmill already anticipating it breaking down and sort of waiting for it to break down. But if you're buying something used and they say, oh, hey, it just needs this or it just needs that or whatever, definitely look into the cost, not only for the parts, but also potentially for the labor before you do that. So yeah, so I think, obviously there's some benefits to getting something brand new. Everything is new, right? There's no wear and tear. There's no worries about how much mileage you've got left on this thing until it breaks down. You're going to have a warranty and everything like that for some length of time. But of course, the used market I think is fantastic. And especially with fitness equipment, I hate to say it, but you probably already know that there's a lot of people who buy treadmills thinking that this will be the thing to motivate them, to keep them consistent, to get them on an exercise program. And they just don't end up getting used. And there's also a lot of people who end up spending a good amount of money on some pretty high-end treadmills that they actually don't end up running on, right? They walk or it just becomes a dust collector or something like that. So I do think that, checking out the secondhand market, going into it with what you know now about specs, about things to consider, about all of that is, a way that you can, see past just the price and sort of understand what it is that you're actually looking for and where that value might be. A lot of people don't know this, and I actually didn't know this for a long time, but you can check the miles and the hours that have been put on that treadmill um, throughout its lifespan. So every brand and every model is a little bit different. So this is something that you're going to have to Google to kind of see. But if you're, say, considering buying a specific machine, rather than just asking someone like, hey, how much should you use this? Because, for some people, a lot of running is very different than the next person's a lot of running and that sort of thing. So just to be able to check and actually look at how many miles or how many hours are on the treadmill, at least it's going to give you an idea of whether or not this thing has been, very heavily used, or maybe it's been, purchased 10 years ago and it's still essentially brand new. I found, looking for secondhand treadmills, it was really, really hard to find info on something that somebody bought 10 years ago, right? You can Google the price or the cost of XYZ treadmill, you're going to see what it costs new for today's version, right? This year's model of that treadmill doesn't really tell you that much about that model that was bought 10 years ago, how much it costs and stuff like that. So in terms of the value, some people are selling something secondhand because they want to buy something new. And so they're looking to really get as much cash back as possible. Whereas other people are like, this thing has been sitting in my basement and I haven't looked at it for years. I don't have space for it. Just get rid of it. And they're looking to, offhand it as easily and as quickly as possible. So, if we're talking about a 10-year-old treadmill, that machine might have been owned by an avid runner who did almost all their workouts on it. That thing's got, 10,000 miles on it. And it's going to be getting on its last legs pretty soon. Or maybe it was bought by somebody who like used it a few times. Maybe they walked on it. Maybe they thought they were going to love running and they really didn't. So it just kind of sat there. And, it's something that you now can get a tremendous amount of life out of and a lot of value out of. On average, the average lifespan of a treadmill is about 10 years. But I mean, I would not want to use that number as a way to say like, okay, yes, this is a good purchase or no, it's not a good purchase, because I do think that so much of that depends on the wear and tear and of course on things like how much maintenance and et cetera that machine has had. If it's been well maintained, if it's got, say, the reversible belt, if it's a self-lubricating machine, hasn't had that many hours or miles on it, then you're certainly going to get a heck of a lot more than 10 years out of something. So, in summary, kind of just bringing it all back around together for you today, um, buying a treadmill, whether that's a new treadmill, a used treadmill, it can seem really intimidating. You're looking on websites, or maybe you're looking on secondhand websites, you're trying to compare specs, but you don't even know what some of the stuff means. What belt size do I need? How many horsepower, weight capacity? Like you've got lots of questions. You're not really sure like what's just marketing and what sort of, the bones of this treadmill, really understanding what's so important. So I hope that today I was able to give you a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of a perspective around what you need to know, what are the most important things to consider. so that you can narrow down your search significantly, feel like you're actually comparing apples to apples when you're looking at different brands, different treadmill models, beyond just online reviews. I think that online reviews can be very helpful, but the challenge with some online reviews is that only people who feel very strongly, especially very strongly in a negative way, are going to bother to post an online review. So, someone who just happened to unfortunately get a little bit of a lemon, someone who had a terrible experience, maybe they bought a machine that wasn't appropriate for them. They sometimes will have, terrible reviews online, even though it's not the machine's fault. You just maybe didn't buy one that was appropriate for what you needed it for. Or I saw a review when I was, getting ready for this episode. I'd see someone say that their machine crapped out after 12 years. And I'm like, well, 12 years of running on a treadmill, like I would hardly call that crapping out. You had it for over a decade. But I guess maybe the expectation there was that it was going to last a lifetime. I don't know. So anyway, I hope that today, you got something out of this episode, able to think beyond and see beyond just other people's opinions, online reviews, kind of get into like, what are the most important things? What are those specs that you want to look for? So you can understand how that you can get a really good deal, a really good price on a treadmill, and make sure that it's a machine that is going to be perfect for you, do everything you need it to, and that you're really going to love and be able to help you with your running for hopefully years and years to come. So that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, I would love your feedback. You can tell me what you thought of this episode, how you enjoyed it, over on Instagram. Again, you can find me at Steph the Runner's Dietitian. You also can leave comments and questions and stuff like that right here on Spotify or wherever you happen to be listening to this podcast, which is an interesting new feature that I have seen come out in the podcasting world. And of course, if you need help, not just with maybe picking out a treadmill, but with your training, nutrition, kind of putting all the pieces of the strategy together, of course, I would love to help you out. You can find more information about how we can work together to create a plan for you at my website. That's www.stephanienetchuk.com. All right, that is it for today. We will see you right back here next week. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.